I want to welcome everybody to this, which is, I think, the final session of the Fashion CEO Agenda this year. The whole session is focusing on policy gaps and opportunities. Our session is focusing on efficient use of resources and the policy gaps and opportunities to address that opportunity. I'm Linda Greer. I'm a Senior Global Fellow with the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs, which is the leading environmental NGO in China, although I am working from the United States. Many of you probably know me better from my 30 years at the Natural Resources Defense Council, where I previously developed the Clean by Design program that Louis Perkins is now running at the Apparel Impact Institute. So we have a very exciting panel with us today to focus on this topic. And I want to note for all of you before we get started that we have two important areas on the right-hand part of your screen, a chat function where you can be weighing in with comments as we go through, and a Q&A function which is specifically for questions. As a moderator, I will keep my eye on those, and that will help us for the discussion after each of the panelists goes forward. So each panelist will talk to us for 4 minutes, and then we will look forward to a discussion based in the Q&As. And I would like to start with Louis Perkins, who is the president of the Apparel Impact Institute and a long-term friend of mine. Take it away, Louis.
Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you, everyone who's joining and listening today. I think the point at which we are in this movement around sustainable fashion is pretty empowering. And I think those of us who've been working in the space for 10, 15 years plus, it's encouraging to see the level of acceleration that's happening amongst not only brand retailers and manufacturers, but the alignment that's happening amongst a number of organizations and those of us who are sitting at the table virtually today. But I wanted to address some of my key points really around the work that Apparel Impact Institute is doing related to efficiencies, but also related to assisting the industry in reaching its science-based targets, along with other key targets which it's hard to unbundle, such as water and chemistry, and ultimately, as we look at raw materials, land use. These topics are all embedded. But as today we're talking about efficiency, I wanted to give you sort of an indication of the work that we're doing and why it's driving directly into this key target for the industry, which, depending on which work stream you're part of, we're sort of claiming this 45% CO2 reduction, and that's as we're all working towards 2030. But what I wanted to do quickly was share on my screen a slide that I'm a very visual person, and so being able to kind of see what are we talking about when we're talking about efficiencies, and where does it fit within this sort of larger context of reaching science-based targets. So if I can hit this, I think, is this going to allow me? I should have to share this screen. Let's see, share. No, it doesn't seem to want to let me do it, but I know that I submitted it earlier, so if someone else is sharing it, if not, I'll talk to it. Maybe if the back-end tech folks, I think, have a copy of it, but it does not seem to. There we go. Let's try that. How is that? Okay, view. So what I wanted to basically show is this is a visual that has been developed in partnership with the World Resource Institute and AII, my organization, and it will be part of a report that's coming out in the next few weeks around the roadmap for addressing carbon in scope 3, the supply chain of the apparel industry. And what you're looking at here is the 4 tiers of the supply chain. And for those of you who've been in other sessions, I know the material session was previous to this one, you'll start to see how we're beginning to look at these levers or focus areas, with the first 6 being the primary areas for interventions or program scale, and 7 being the circular business models that will help support that. Other areas of the GFA meeting today are talking about materials, so I'll just touch on material efficiency, scaled preferred materials, and acceleration of next generation materials as key focus areas. But the one we're talking about today is number 4, maximizing energy efficiency. And if you look at that as a program or an intervention that can be taken on within tiers 3, 2, and 1, you see an average percentage of CO2 that is emitted in that area. So for tier 3, roughly 16%. The report will give you all of the methodology behind that in ranges. This is just obviously for a highest level illustration. Tier 2, material production, this is wet processing, 45%. And then finally, cut and sew, finished assembly, 16%. So for AII, the work that we're scaling around efficiencies, specifically starting in tier 2 for material production, wet processing, is where we see the greatest opportunity for lowering carbon with energy efficiency, followed by number 5, which is coal elimination. This is where the burning of coal for boilers and thermal heat is contributing greatly to the carbon emissions of the industry. And we know that if we can maximize energy efficiency, followed by diverting from burning coal to lower carbon emitting thermal processes, or potentially disrupting the use of boilers as a whole, which is the edge of innovation. And finally, the shift to renewable energy, which looks beyond just the boilers, but all of the electricity that's powering these facilities.
Louis, I'm going to have to cut you off there.
Yeah.
With our 4 minutes, I'm so sorry, since this is
okay.
really very interesting.
I've made my point, and I'll take it off the screen share. So,
and we'll return to this in the discussion.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. So our next speaker is actually not with us in person, but we have a video of her remarks. It's Delara Burkhardt, who is a member of the Committee of the Environment from the MEP. So I think, UNECE, that you are going to help us by showing her on video.
Textiles, whether clothing or other products, are our second skin. They surround us every day and everywhere. The textile sector is a resource-intensive sector with huge environmental and social impacts. Today, the fashion industry is mostly unsustainable. It has introduced more collections than there are seasons in a year. The number of garments produced annually has doubled since 2000, while the quality of our clothes is getting worse and worse and being far away from anything that we could call ready for circular economy or fair. And the big question is, do we really know where our clothes come from? Some actors have developed strategies how to tackle these problems, but we need a level playing field. The European Union could use its weight as the world's largest single market to promote binding due diligence obligation. It could set standards for sustainable businesses that would also have an impact beyond Europe's borders. Sustainable action should no longer be a competitive disadvantage in the future, and numerous companies could benefit from the increased legal certainty. The supply chain law would also bring clear improvements for citizens. They could be sure that their t-shirts, for example, are not produced using child labor. As you may know, the European Parliament is already working on that, and we have passed a resolution in March this year on mandatory due diligence. In the second half of this year, we are awaiting the Commission's proposal. The European Union has to set up traceability systems for food sectors, but other sectors, such as the apparel sectors, are still to be dealt with. Traceability systems for the garment value chain must take into account that wide variety of process and transformation. We need a reliable and credible system of support and disclosure at production and product level. We need to know under which social, human rights and governance and environmental conditions these products were made, as well as their suitability for circularity. Access to this information system should be free, unlimited, according to established open data standards. The use of an electronic product passport with information on procurement would be an important step towards more transparency and consumer education. As a member of the Environment Committee, I very much welcome the European Commission's announcements to drive ambitious legislation as part of the Green Deal, Europe's agenda to be the first climate-neutral continent. It is clear the circular economy must play a major part in managing the social ecological transition, but we can only have a successful Green Deal if all policy areas and sectors are working hand in hand. A world without clothing is not possible. We need a holistic approach on textile to reduce its environmental and climate impact. We need effective action in the areas of materials, fabric design, production, distribution, use and reuse, collection and recycling, but also on human rights and a progressive investment policy. A crucial moment will be the publication of the so-called textile strategy from the European Commission in the next weeks. I am really excited to see the milestones Commission will propose and whether we see a clear call for legislation. As you may know, the European Parliament unfortunately does not yet have the right of initiative that national parliaments, for example, have. Therefore, we are dependent on ambitious proposals coming from the European Commission. If not, I will clearly keep pushing for a legislative approach, and for this I will need support of all stakeholders. I will stop my contribution here, and I hope the plenary will allow me to join you later for the Q&A session. If not, please feel free to contact me. So let's start together a fashion revolution.
Okay, great. Those were very, very interesting remarks. And for those of us not based in Europe, we're very interested in what's going on there and very much ourselves looking forward to the upcoming textile strategy. And perhaps it can serve as a model for elsewhere in the world. So we've got a lot of eyes on that. For our next speaker is Maria Teresa Pisani. And Maria is the acting head of the Sustainable Trade and Outreach Unit of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. So Maria Teresa, take it away.
Thank you very much, Linda. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. And thank you to the GFA for the opportunity to participate to this great session today. I will focus on highlights from the ongoing work that the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe is doing on traceability and transparency of value chains as key enabler actually for efficient use of resources in the industry, as clearly actually stated in the CEO agenda, which is about really making sustainability profitable. Now, what are the key drivers here? First, let me highlight the consumers' increasing demand for sustainable products. We all read that it's more than 70% of consumers that are ready to make more responsible choices. Problem is that they actually do not yet trust much the information they get about the who, the where, the how made their clothes. Second is civil society, investors and regulators that are raising their attention on the credibility of sustainability claims and an increasing body of policy legislation on support of that at the EU level, for instance, but also beyond, is actually happening, coming in place. Third is that the information to support responsible choices for consumers and for businesses is actually available along the value chain, but is somehow segregated in silos that are not connected, is coded in different ways and does not flow. So that's why traceability and transparency of value chains, in our view, are key to make that connection and to involve, the coordinated work to uptake the solutions that are there, blockchain, physical, digital markers are now available, and to scale them up. So in terms of key policy actions, here are some recommendations emerging from our work for a smart policy mix. First of all, we recommend policy coherence at the international, regional, and national level. This is really key to establish the level playing field that the industry is demanding to give legal certainty. And there is certainly also a need to define the minimum set of data and information to trace and make transparent sustainability performance for products, for processes, and for facilities along the entire value chain. Need to start from the field, going to the shelf, and now beyond to the post-consumption. Second, there is a need to establish incentives, financial, non-financial, positive and negative, in support of the good players, but also to phase out the wrong choices. Examples are VAT reductions, fast-tracking processes, sustainable procurement. Third is support to innovation, to harness the potential of advanced technologies like blockchain, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, markers. They are all promising to connect industry actors and to support the information and documents exchange that we need for reliability of claims. And here, norms and standards to help harmonization, interoperability, and to deal with data privacy and security and governance are essential. This is a strong demand from the industry. Fourth is about building capacity and raising awareness. It's essential, especially for SMEs, including in producing countries, but also for other key actors, investors, civil society, consumers. And finally, support to partnerships and initiatives that bring together all the actors like the GFA and ensure that exchange of good practices and lessons learned is there. It's happening, then it's possible. That's why this is important. Now at UNECE, we just produced a toolbox including policy recommendation, implementation guidelines, and the UN Global Information Exchange Standard. And we are now testing all this in blockchain pilots for cotton and leather with wide engagement of industry actors. The whole initiative is implemented with support of the EU in line with the OECD due diligence guidelines. And now we are launching a call to action for the uptake of the whole toolbox. Please join. I think we are, just to conclude, clear about the what. We have a wide range of solutions out there for the how. We need to join forces to uptake and implement and get really to the critical mass we need to accelerate on the sustainable transformation we need in this industry. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Maria Teresa. Very interesting comments. And now we're going to turn to Abhishek Bansal. Hi, Abhishek. You're up.
Thanks, Linda. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I'm Abhishek. I'm working as Head of Sustainability at Arvind Limited. We are a textile manufacturer based out of India. And I think from the policy side, the key point for me to add here today is what we are lacking in most of the production geographies is the appropriate pricing of resources and the policies around resource pricing. So, for example, the pricing of water. So there's practically no price on fresh water in many of the production geographies in Asia and South Asia, and which doesn't really promote water saving. In an ideal world, one would have cost of water recycling to be much lower than the cost of fresh water itself. So we can have a policy around water usage and water pricing in the production countries that would really help accelerate the water use efficiency. Similar is the case with energy. In many of the countries, in the production countries, we still have subsidies on carbon-intensive fuels, or the carbon-intensive fuels are cheap or are not appropriately taxed. So, which really doesn't encourage the efficient use of energy in these countries, and we still see a lot of gaps in where we should be in terms of efficiency. Another thing that we see is the enforcement of regulations around water discharge. So there are regulations which are in place in some of the countries. In some countries, regulations are weak, but enforcement we've seen is broadly weak. Wherever even regulations are there, enforcement is not enough, which also leads to a lot of excess use of chemicals. Because you're not responsible for maintaining your wastewater, and some of these chemicals are also really low priced, especially the auxiliaries. So if we can have policies around energy and water, as well as the discharge regulations can be strengthened in the production geographies, a lot of improvement can happen. We've seen some emerging cases, like for example, 3 years ago, clean energy cess was put up on coal in India. So in India, we pay an additional about $6 a ton of coal consumption now, which goes towards strengthening our clean energy generation in the country. So similar things I think could accelerate. We have energy efficiency certificates now for the textile industry, which again penalizes you if your specific energy consumption is more than the benchmark, and if it is less, you get issued the allowances or certificates to trade in the market. So these policies are a good sign. From the as a manufacturer and the behavior that we see from the brand and how that could change if we place equal merit on sustainability as we place on price and quality, because most of the sourcing that we see currently still happens on the basis of purely on price and quality and delivery, etc. But sustainability is not a driving factor. Sustainability is starting to be one of the factors for sourcing, but it is still not the decision making or the real driver behind sourcing decisions. So any policy around that, any regulations which could come in Europe or in buying geographies around the product environment footprint and its linkage to either taxation or a similar measure would really help lower the resource consumption in the production geographies. And my last thing to add is on the traceability side. We, as our company, we are present across tier 1, 2, and 3, but we see there's very little transparency in terms of where our product is going. So we, as a tier 2, we don't know which brand is buying our products, because most of the purchase, or I would say almost 40-50% of the purchase is done by the intermediaries or by the factories. So if I place equal percentages at the brand end, so I'm sure the brands are also not aware where their fabrics are being made or where their yarns are being spun. So we are quite far away in that sense to be talking about product environment footprint if we're not aware about the production locations of bulk of our products or bulk of our environmental footprints. So a policy around that would certainly also help. That was it for me.
Okay, thank you so much, Abhishek. Those were all very interesting points that I think are very relevant to the topic of our discussion here on the panel. And in the last but certainly not least category, we have Jeannie Renne Malone from VF Corporation. Take it away, Jeannie.
Great. Thank you so much, Linda, and many thanks to the GFA and my fellow panelists. It's been a great discussion so far. So VF is a global apparel, footwear, and accessories company with 13 iconic brands, including the North Face, Timberland, Vans, and Napapiri. And there are over 1 million pieces of product manufactured for VF brands every day. These millions of products are made by nearly 1 million workers across the globe. So given our global reach, we truly believe we have the opportunity to use our scale for good. And our commitment to sustainability is tied to our business purpose, to power movements of sustainable and active lifestyles for the betterment of people and our planet. And being purpose-led enables us to make a positive impact through all stages of our value chain. We've established a number of environmental and social goals, all which align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and focus on that interconnection between people and the planet. We also recently announced industry-leading science-based targets to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions across our entire value chain, consistent with the goal of global efforts to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030. We've established roadmaps for all these targets, knowing that will require vision, leadership, and collaboration across our enterprise and with many external partners inside and outside of our industry. And in fact, we partner with many of the organizations on this panel to strengthen transparency and accountability of our supply chain. For example, on a quarterly basis, we utilize the IPE Blue Map, Linda, to screen our entire factory base in China. We also collaborate with industry partners and other brands to accelerate supply chain environmental impact reductions. For example, we leverage Lewis's organization, the Apparel Impact Institute Clean by Design program, to improve energy and water efficiency of our fabric mills, where these mills typically include resource-intensive processes such as dyeing, washing, and printing. We're also increasing engagement with other stakeholders with a deep interest in sustainability. Just wanted to mention that, for example, the ESG investor community, in February last year, we issued a 500 million euro green bond, the first in the apparel and footwear industry. So as noted throughout this panel, improving transparency and traceability is a priority for our industry and for VF, and is a key enabler for resource efficiency. We're monitoring a number of policies around the globe to help advance our goals around resource efficiency, renewable energy, energy efficiency, wastewater discharge, traceability, and I'll just touch on a few of those now. So we've published supply chain maps for many of our iconic VF brand products. By 2021, we strive to have 100 products mapped from material origin to distribution centers. And it is possible to know where raw materials originate and that they're sourced in a responsible manner. Understanding environmental risks through our traceability efforts have actually changed sourcing decisions. In fact, we've shifted sourcing out of countries that fail to protect the environment and contribute to deforestation. And while VF prioritizes traceability and will continue to lean in, governments can help the industry scale their initiatives. Government action in supporting traceability efforts is key for lowering the apparel industry's carbon footprint and to mitigate the negative human rights impacts. Current consultation within the EU strategy for sustainable textiles surrounding the possibility for increased technology in the traceability field, including product passports, tagging, and watermarks, align with our sustainability goals to reduce our own impact while providing consumers the assurance that their products are being made as sustainably as possible. So harmonizing traceability tools through policy would only strengthen these efforts, as well as provide consumers the necessary information to make informed decisions on purchasing sustainable products. Risks can only be mitigated if they can be identified, and efforts to equip fashion brands with the necessary tools to see where the negative impact on the planet is critical to reaching efficiency of resources in the value chain. And then on the environmental side, our largest impacts in production are from raw material extraction, processing, and production, making up 42% of our overall carbon emissions. Using life cycle assessments, we identify the areas where we have the greatest potential to reduce the impact of the materials we use, which not only benefit communities and the environment, but also support our consumers in their desires to purchase more sustainable products. So with that, we support the European Union's effort on their voluntary product environmental footprint initiative to raise corporate and consumer awareness and substantiate green claims. And lastly, on materials, we have a goal to source 50% of nylon and polyester from recycled materials by 2025, but we need policymakers to strengthen recycling infrastructure, support efforts to recycle chemicals and plastics, and harmonize legislation for definitions of waste versus items with an opportunity for a second life. And finally, being a global company, we're also looking at gaps and opportunities from a US policy perspective. The Biden-Harris administration here in the US set a strong NDC and outlined a number of climate-friendly policies that align with our priorities to meet our goals and targets. In particular, and relevant to our business and goals, we support policies that incentivize regenerative agriculture, investment in energy efficiency and renewable energy, and investments in historically disenfranchised communities and supporting a just transition for climate-impacted industries. And so in conclusion, we have a wide range of technical and policy solutions. We need to collaborate to accelerate sustainable progress across our industry.
Great, thank you so much, Jeannie. So now we're entering into the discussion part of our panel. I'm very much looking forward to hearing some interaction across our panelists. And I'm going to take the prerogative of the chair to introduce the first question to those of you who can offer up some answers. So efficient use of resources is really regarded as a low-hanging fruit opportunity to reduce the carbon, water, and chemical use in the fashion industry, in that it relies on readily available technology and that it also saves money, even over the short term, because of the savings that it delivers in costs for energy and materials. Yet most experts agree that we are nowhere near scale, that we've only scratched the surface with improving textile mill efficiencies around the world. So, panelists, what do you see as the key pinch points keeping this strategy from coming to scale and delivering the carbon, water, and chemical reductions that we're seeking? Importantly for our panel, what do you see as the policy opportunities that could really help to close this gap?
Linda, you're opening up for any of us to jump in?
Yep, please just jump in.
Well, I'll get it started a little bit. I think that for what we're looking at in terms of efficiency scaling, and obviously we were created at AII to take this work and to align it with other programs that are out there and look at how it's coming together. I think we're in a phase right now of sort of making it clear to the supply chain and manufacturers what brands want. So the signal from the market is really key. I feel like the pinch has been that we haven't been clear on which programs are priority programs. And then, as we bring those shared cost models, and I wrote this in the comments too, but as we start to bring from a policy perspective, groups like AII can work with brands like VF Core and others and manufacturers like Arvind, my panelists here, to kind of bring these shared cost models to accelerate across facilities, but then favorable loan terms for technologies related to coal elimination or renewable energy, tax benefits by region for manufacturers that are actually doing this work. So I think the real opportunity is to turn the dial up. And the analogy that I'll use is I lived in Atlanta, Georgia for all the years when the tax incentives for film and television came in, and it transformed the state of Georgia. It's now one of the top regions for making films in the world. And that happened because of huge tax incentives to bring that industry in. So I encourage anyone who's listening that can solve for that problem. That would be a tremendous amount of opportunity to be able to make it attractive by region for countries to be able to do this work.
Thanks, Louis. That's great. And Abhishek, you hit upon a couple of very important points, I think, here in your opening remarks. First, noting that sustainability is not the driver on sourcing decisions, so that I think that calls for some policy push from other directions rather than trying to rely just on that. And you also made the very important point that water and energy don't cost enough. And so this economic driver that would otherwise perhaps be very helpful really is underutilized and not actually that potent perhaps to drive this. So this does, I think, wind up with a call for some policy initiatives to try to fill that gap. Not to put you on the spot, but I wonder if you have any other particular ideas as a very progressive manufacturer of policies the government could provide, either based in Europe and the United States or based in Asia, that would help companies like yours get greater market share, basically, for the very good work that you do.
Thanks, Linda. So I think there's dual need here, and I would like to point to what Louis has said. There's need for incentives, and as well as there's need to sort of increase the cost of natural resources, because we've not put a sufficient price on natural resources for people to respect and conserve those resources here. And second, on the sourcing side as well, so it should not happen like as it happens currently. We recycle water, we are less competitive than our competitor manufacturer who's not recycling the water, because it costs you more to recycle the water or to save the resources. So if we realize that those are sort of negative incentives which are at play here, which don't allow a wide-scale resource efficiency, which otherwise should be commonplace, as you highlighted in your question, and try to overcome those by external forces, either by prioritizing these in the sourcing decisions, or by the European policy, or by the policy in the domestic regions. And I think one example there is also of Ethiopia, where Ethiopia emerged as a new manufacturing destination over the last few years. But there the government was very clear from the beginning with all the textile parks that they're setting up there are having water recycling and resource efficiency built in from the day one. So what government does, of course, can really change things overnight. But in the interim, like the sourcing decisions and policy push from EU or US would also help.
Abhishek, I just have one other question to follow up on that. Louis made the outset about the industry's very ambitious SBTi commitments for 45% reductions by 2030. I wonder if you have seen any movement or have any sense as to whether or not, as a result of those ambitious commitments, some companies will begin to use sustainability in their sourcing decisions. Because honestly, you kind of can't have it both ways. You can't have that very ambitious commitment and then at the same time not really use energy, water efficiency criteria for your sourcing decisions. Otherwise, the numbers just will never add up. just wonder, have you seen anything from your perch? And then Jeannie, I might turn to you to ask how VF is thinking about that.
Definitely, and I think that what you said is we are seeing that, but that is more secondary. I think primary question here is whether there is enough awareness of where goods are being produced and what is the impact of individual product types. Right now, I don't think there's sufficient of either of these two, sufficient information about either of these two. We see a lot of lack of data collection, or like the ability to collect data itself is not being there right now. So we hardly see in the manufacturing setup there's any monitoring happening at the product level. There's of course with the help of sort of Hague Index and a lot of other industry initiatives, there's now more and more monitoring happening at the facility level. But we still lack the granular data on what is the product impact for someone to take those decisions. However, technology is moving very fast. There are now technologies, IoT-based enabled machines, which can gradually connect to even the older machinery, and you can have those data accessible. But I think first industry will have to invest on making that data available and also on the transparency and traceability. And then of course we are in a better position to decide like which product manufacturer in which geography or with which manufacturer has a lower impact and how I can prioritize those. Right now, we are looking more at the averages and sort of the data which comes up through different indices, but that may not be, that may be also leading us to false decisions or wrong decisions because it is not accurate or attributable to a proper product.
And Jeannie, maybe you could give us a glimpse as to the question of how VF is really using efficiency measurements for its sourcing decisions, or sort of the match between ambitious environmental commitments and these eco-efficiency criteria.
Sure. I think there's two parts here. I want to speak to both the processing efficiencies within the factories, as well as sourcing decisions from raw material perspective. And so as we look throughout our nominated suppliers, our contracted suppliers, we don't own any of the factories. These are all contracted suppliers. We see an opportunity to truly transform the industry with partnerships like with AII, IFC, other organizations that are truly helping brands and helping factories create that link and that awareness around the opportunity for increased resource efficiency. And this is through creating access to financial and technical resources for rooftop solar, for energy efficiency upgrades, for wastewater quality improvements. And so there truly is an opportunity to transform the industry. So we welcome those kinds of partnerships with open arms and think that this is truly the path forward for to reduce our impacts from a processing perspective. Some of our brands really rely on that piece of our operations to really look at how they're going to reduce individually their greenhouse gas emissions on that processing side. And then on the sourcing side, when we look at raw material extraction, again, raw material extraction, processing, and manufacturing is nearly 50% of our overall impacts. We look really closely at that whole piece of the puzzle. And so when we think about how we are going to convert to sustainable raw materials, we can first look at the commercially available materials, recycled polyester, recycled nylon, but we really need improvements in the recycling infrastructure for chemical recycling, for plastic recycling. There's an enormous opportunity there for improvement. And then on the other side, for those materials we're sourcing, such as wool, leather, cotton, there is a tremendous opportunity for conversion to sustainable regenerative agriculture to truly put more carbon back in the ground than we're emitting out into the atmosphere. So those are some of the sourcing decisions we're thinking very seriously about, as we know to reach our science-based parallel vision that by 2030, we aim to originate 100% of our top 9 materials from regenerative, responsibly sourced, renewable, or recycled sources. So there's a lot of work ahead. There's a lot of, I think, technology and innovation opportunity, as well as improvements from a policy and a technical perspective.
So much. And Maria Teresa, where would you say that your work in the United Nations group could really sort of best contribute on these policy gaps? You know, where do you see your niche when you look across the ecosystem of all the players on this topic?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Jeannie has been mentioning that, you know, to address risks and make efficient.
Mute, Maria Teresa. Start from the beginning.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah, great. Now, just to connect to what Jeannie was saying, if you want to, let's say, address risks and impacts along, you know, the value chain and achieve efficiencies, improve on water consumption and energy consumption, hazardous chemicals use, you need to know where these impacts are happening and to which scale, you know. And this is something lacking right now. What is also lacking, and we see it with the work the actors we are engaging with, is that even when information and data are available, they are not standardized, they don't talk to each other. Very hard for actors to connect and really to exchange on the same basis. So where I see a role for the United Nations for international players is to create this harmonization and these standards to allow really the industry and the actors to speak the same language when it comes to risks, impacts, and measures that can be taken. So we should come up with these standards the industry needs really to speak this common language. And this is what we have been trying to do actually with the work on traceability and transparency of value chains. And here I want also to answer maybe a question on the chat on the role that brands and retailers can have and whether the transparency should be pushed from there. I think retailers and brands definitely play a very important role when it comes really to drive and push action along the value chain upstream as much as possible. At the same time, I think they need to be supported in this effort. They cannot do it alone. It's easy for them to reach perhaps to the first, the second tier. It's much, much harder to get upstream in the value chain when it comes to the raw material production and sourcing. A lot of intermediaries in between. Data privacy, data security are big issues on the table, not very easy for them to get the data and the information that they need, even when these are available. So also standards, regulations, and norms on disclosure, on data privacy and data security, and on the identification of the right set of information that needs to be collected and exchanged is very, very important. So international organizations can play a role in support that standardization, harmonization efforts.
I'm very struck by how fundamental this traceability issue is. You know, going back to your points and to Abhishek's points that brands don't necessarily know where their stuff is coming from. Customers also won't know where stuff is coming from. And it's a pillar of what needs to be done, and so fundamental, so basic that you kind of want to pull your hair out that it hasn't been done yet. But certainly as a priority policy gap, I would have to put that one way, way up there. We have actually reached the end of our time. So I wanted to, first of all, thank our excellent panelists for all of your presentations and for our discussion. And I want to tell the audience that now we are ready for our closing session. So as we leave, you will be funneled into the closing remarks, which I encourage you all to listen to. And I'll see you all in the main session. And thank you again for an excellent job.